Well, welcome viewers to the Pro Bricky Count Straight YouTube channel with Dr. JW Ayub. We're analysing the behaviour of the female politician Anika Wells, and I'm in episode number 3, the honest mistake defence. When accountability was softened by language. And this is a behavioural political analysis. The episode's not merely about apology language. It's about temptation, moral softening, and the psychological moment where entitlement begins negotiating with conscience. The most dangerous form of political corruption often begins long before criminality. It begins when temptation no longer feels wrong enough to resist, as in the case of Anika Wells. The honest mistake, in quotes, defence matters because it reveals how political systems psychologically reduce the emotional weight of financial breaches after exposure occurs. This issue is no longer only the travel claims. The issue becomes the gradual moral drift, where convenience, entitlement, self-justification and protected power, political power, begin weakening internal restraint before the public even sees the behaviour. After the breaches were identified, Anika Wells apologised and accepted the audit findings while describing the claims as, quote, honest mistakes. Reports also stated she believed some decisions represented cost-effective choices despite still breaching the rules. The wording matters psychologically, viewers. Language now enters the scandal like emotional insulation around consequence, not entitlement, misunderstanding, not moral failure, administrative complexity, not temptation, human error, not dangerous judgment, a technical breach. And viewers, this is where the spinal bleed of the context must deepen. Most political public corruption does not erupt suddenly into obvious criminality. It evolves through smaller personal internal permissions, bending interpretation, assuming access, normalizing privilege, reducing guilt, and trusting that institutional cushioning will absorb the consequences should one get caught, as in the case of Anika Wells. And that progression matters because temptation itself is behavioural and it measures the person, how they deal with it. This is the measurement for morality. The political public office holder begins gradually separating, as in the case of Anika Wells, what is permitted from what is wise, from what is morally restrained. And that separation is where the moral decay starts in these politicians. Viewers, this episode should not falsely accused Wells of criminal corruption, where none was formally found conveniently. That distinction remains critical legal and ethical business. But behavioural corruption can still exist atmospherically before criminal thresholds are crossed. A political leader may remain technically within survival territory while internally drifting toward entitlement psychology. I deserve flexibility. This is understandable. The system is complicated. Others do worse than this. The intention was good. And that's how moral boundaries weaken quietly. And this is why the Australian public has reacted emotionally to the Anika Wells scandal. The citizen recognises temptation differently from institutional language. Ordinary people know what it feels like to justify a financial shortcut internally before choosing whether to act. The issue becomes, did the political leader, here in the case of Anika Wells, resist temptation with visible restraint, or merely explain the behaviour once scrutiny arrived? And I dare say it was the latter. The distinction changes the moral atmosphere entirely for the viewers. The strongest contrast in this episode is not between legality and illegality, it's between private restraint and public explanation. And this is where Anika Wells is exposed. A struggling Australian mother incorrectly handling Centrelink paperwork does not receive national narrative cushioning. A father making repeated financial mistakes in business may face immediate consequence. But political systems often create emotional buffers around authority figures, while ordinary citizens experience direct pressure and consequence. And that imbalance intensifies the perception of concealed evil intention beneath the polished explanation, as in the case of Anika Wells. Not theoretical evil. It's more dangerous than that. It's quiet self-permission. And this is where the narcissistic political underlay reaches maturity. The public begins sensing that the apology is not fully carrying the moral weight of the behaviour displayed. Instead, the wording itself begins managing the audience emotionally, and the audience can judge. And the scandal therefore transforms. It is no longer only rules were breached. In the case of Anika Wells, it becomes what kind of internal moral drift allows repeated breaches to feel acceptable before exposure forces correction. And that's what happened. It forced a correction. Anika Wells would have carried on gleefully without exposure. So in closing, viewers, when political leadership uses explanation to soften consequence, accountability becomes emotionally managed, at least on the surface. The issue is not only whether the mistake was honest, viewers. The issue is whether temptation, entitlement, and protected political power slowly weakened the moral restraint that Anika Wells required before the audit ever began. I'm Dr. JWA, youth theologist since 1994. Like, subscribe, press the bell, comment to educate me, and share the video to help somebody else. And I'll see you in episode 4 on our journey in behavioural, political, psychological analysis, starring Anika Wells. Bye for now.